What if the most important footage ever recorded by the United States military had been sitting in a classified vault for over a decade? And the only reason you're seeing it today is because one man decided he'd had enough of the silence? That's not a hypothetical. That's exactly what happened. And once you understand the full chain of events, who was involved, what they saw, and why it was buried, you'll never look at the sky the same way again. In 2017, a quiet but seismic shift occurred in how the United States government talked about unidentified aerial phenomena. For decades, the official position had been dismissal. Ridicule even. The government wasn't investigating UFOs. There was nothing to investigate. Anyone who suggested otherwise was a conspiracy theorist, a crank, or someone who'd watched too many movies. But behind closed doors, the story was very different. Deep inside the Pentagon, a program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP, had been quietly running for years, funded by a black budget allocation that most members of Congress didn't even know existed. Its mission was straightforward, even if its findings were anything but: identify, analyze, and assess unidentified aerial phenomena encountered by U.S. military personnel. The man running that program was Luis Elizondo. Elizondo was not a fringe figure. He was a career intelligence officer, the kind of person who spent his professional life operating in the shadows of national security, dealing in verified facts and hard evidence. He wasn't prone to exaggeration. He wasn't chasing headlines. And when he finally walked away from the Pentagon in October 2017, it wasn't because he'd lost interest. It was because he was frustrated, deeply, professionally frustrated, that the information his program had gathered was being suppressed rather than acted upon. When Elizondo resigned, he didn't leave empty-handed. He brought with him 3 declassified videos recorded by US Navy pilots, footage that had been cleared for release but never made public. 3 videos that, once the world saw them, would change the conversation about UFOs forever. The first video captured an encounter that took place in November 2004 off the coast of San Diego. The USS Nimitz carrier strike group was conducting routine training exercises when radar operators began tracking a strange object. It was sitting at approximately 80,000 feet, well above the operational ceiling of any known aircraft, and it had been there for days. When a pair of F/A-18F Super Hornets was dispatched to investigate, what they found defied every known principle of aerodynamics. The object, white, oblong, roughly the size and shape of a Tic Tac breath mint, descended from 80,000 feet to just above the ocean surface in a matter of seconds. Not minutes, seconds. That's a drop of roughly 15 miles in the time it takes you to blink twice. No aircraft in the history of human engineering has ever come close to that kind of performance. The fastest military jets in existence would be torn apart by the aerodynamic forces involved in such a maneuver. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't playing by the same rules. Naval aviator Lieutenant Chad Underwood was one of the pilots ordered to pursue the object. His F-18 was equipped with a forward-looking infrared pod, a FLIR system, one of the most sophisticated tracking systems in the US military's arsenal. What he recorded that day became known as the Tic Tac video, and it remains one of the most analyzed pieces of footage in the history of UAP research. Underwood described the object as completely featureless. No wings, no visible exhaust. No method of propulsion that his instruments could detect. The FLIR system, which tracks heat signatures, picked up nothing from the object's ends. No engine exhaust, no thermal bloom, nothing that would indicate any conventional form of propulsion. And yet, the object was moving. Changing altitude, changing airspeed, performing maneuvers that his radar struggled to track. And then, at the end of the encounter, it simply darted off, gone in an instant, leaving Underwood with a question that has never been satisfactorily answered. The other two videos Elizondo brought with him were equally extraordinary. Known as Gimbal and Go Fast, both were recorded by Navy jets from the USS Theodore Roosevelt operating near the Florida coast in 2015. In both cases, the objects captured on film were moving in ways that violated the known laws of physics. They zigzagged without deceleration. They accelerated to speeds estimated at 20 times the speed of sound. They hovered motionless against strong winds and then vanished without warning. Theoretical physicist Michio Kaku, one of the most respected scientific voices in the world, reviewed the footage and was unambiguous in his assessment. These objects, he said, were performing maneuvers that no known technology, human or otherwise, could replicate. The acceleration alone would require a propulsion system that doesn't exist in any engineering textbook. The ability to hover and then instantly accelerate to hypersonic speeds without any visible means of thrust is, by every measure of current physics, impossible. And yet, there it was, on camera, recorded by military-grade equipment, witnessed by trained naval aviators. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence Chris Mellon reviewed the footage and reached a conclusion that cut through the noise with surgical precision. The idea that China or Russia had developed this kind of technology without the United States knowing about it was, in his words, pretty slim. These weren't adversarial drones. These weren't experimental aircraft from a rival nation. Whatever they were operating at a level of technological sophistication that placed them in a category entirely their own. Now, if you've been finding this as mind-bending as we do, take a second and hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more in this series that you won't want to miss, and we're just getting started. Elizondo joined an organization called To the Stars Academy, a research and media company co-founded by former Blink-182 musician Tom DeLonge and staffed by a remarkable collection of former intelligence and defense officials. The goal was ambitious: crack open the vault, get the information out, force a public conversation that the government had been avoiding for decades. To do that, they needed the mainstream media, and they needed the right person to carry the story. Chris Mellon arranged a meeting with Leslie Kean, a best-selling author and investigative journalist who had spent years trying to get serious media outlets to take the UFO question seriously. Kean was well connected in ways that mattered. Her uncle, Thomas Kean, had chaired the 9/11 Commission. She understood how Washington worked, and she understood how to get a story placed where it would have maximum impact. Mellon and Elizondo offered her something extraordinary: access to the videos, documentation of the AATIP program, and on-the-record sources willing to speak publicly. In exchange, she would place the story with the New York Times. Kean teamed up with Ralph Blumenthal, a veteran Times reporter who had come to know her while researching a biography of alien abductions researcher Dr. John Mack and Pentagon correspondent Helene Cooper. Together, they built a story that was, in Blumenthal's words, nailed down chapter and verse. Every source on the record, every document verified, the videos ready to publish. On December 16, 2017, their report hit the front page of the New York Times online edition. The headline announced the existence of a secret Pentagon program investigating UFOs. The videos were embedded directly in the article. Within hours, they had accumulated more views than almost anything else in the history of the Times website. For UFO researchers who had spent decades being dismissed, ridiculed, and ignored, it was a watershed moment. The New York Times, the self-described paper of record, the institution that had long positioned itself as the guardian of verified truth, was reporting on UFOs, not as a curiosity, not as a human interest sidebar, as a front-page national security story. The conversation had changed, and it would never go back. But the Tic Tac and the Navy videos were only the beginning, because while the world was processing what the Times had just published, another story was quietly resurfacing. one that had been buried for nearly 30 years. A story about a man who claimed to have worked inside the most secretive military installation on Earth. A man who said he had seen things that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about human technology. That story and that man are coming up next. If what you just heard raised more questions than it answered, good. That's exactly the point. The next episode goes even deeper. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it, and keep watching.